The stars out here looked wrong. That was the first thing Lieutenant Dara Osai noticed when she pulled her shift at the observation window. Not wrong in a way she could explain to her crew log. Just wrong the way a familiar face looks wrong when the lights are too low. The shapes were there. The distances were off. She put it down to fatigue and went back to her console. The ISS Relentless was 14 months out from Earth, past the Kepler drift, past the last mapped navigation buoy, past the edge of anything anyone had ever officially charted. It was a deep exploration vessel, 212 meters of gray steel and recycled air, built for distance the way a good boot is built for bad roads. Not pretty, not fast, built to last. Her captain was Elena Voss, 44 years old, former combat pilot, former asteroid miner, current pain in the neck of every mission director who had ever tried to tell her what the acceptable parameters of exploration were. She had a jaw like a fence post, and eyes that the crew quietly described as the color of a decision already made. She drank her coffee black because she said adding anything to it was a form of lying to yourself. She was at the command table when the signal came in. It didn't announce itself. Signals from the hegemony never did. They arrived the way a foreman arrives on a job site, with the assumption that everything would stop when they did. The comms board lit up, not one frequency, every frequency. Captain, Ensign Yuri Takiv turned in his seat, his young face doing something complicated. I'm getting a broadband contact. It's not on any registered protocol. Voss set down her coffee. Origin. Ahead of us, approximately 40,000 kilometers, but he paused. The signal is coming from multiple points simultaneously, like a wall. She stood up from the table. Put it on screen. What appeared on the main display was not a ship. It was not a fleet in the usual sense either. It was an arrangement. That was the right word. An arrangement of vessels, spread across a band of space so wide that the Relentless's forward sensors couldn't find either edge. Some of the ships were large, slow, and angular, the way hegemony architecture always was, like buildings that had decided to float. Some were smaller, faster-looking, belonging to member species whose names humans had barely learned to pronounce. Between them, at regular intervals, ran lines of light, barrier buoys, active and pulsing. A wall. An actual wall in space. Dr. Yusuf Akafar came up from the science deck, still holding a tablet. He was the ship's senior xenolinguist, tall, patient, with the habit of tilting his head slightly before he spoke, like he was translating his own thoughts into a language everyone else could use. He looked at the screen for a long time. That's the hegemony outer veil, he said. I've read about it. I didn't think it was real. How real does it look? Voss asked. Very real, Captain. The signal shifted then. A voice came through, not quite a voice. A sound that carried meaning the way music carries mood. The translation matrix on Takiv's board worked for 4 seconds, then produced text. You have reached the boundary of safe space. This zone is restricted under Hegemony Universal Accord, Article 9, Provision 7. There is nothing beyond this point that will benefit your kind. You will turn your vessel around. This is not a request. The bridge went quiet. Voss read the message, then she read it again. She picked up her coffee. Article 9, Provision 7, Akafar murmured. He was already pulling up the Hegemony Accord database on his tablet. That's the clause about biologically young species, the clause that says. That says we're too new to be trusted with certain information, Voss finished. That's a very generous translation. What's the ungenerous one? Akafar looked at her over the tablet. That we're too unpredictable to be allowed near certain things. She set her coffee cup down on the edge of the command table with a small, precise click. Takiv reply. He looked at her. What do I say? Tell them we received their message. Tell them we're reviewing it. He typed sent. The wall of ships on the screen didn't move. What happened next took 3 hours and 14 minutes. It involved 6 additional transmissions from the hegemony, each one slightly more urgent than the last, like a person raising their voice in a library, trying to stay formal while the frustration climbed. The sixth transmission included a visual component, images of the space beyond the barrier, static, interference, a region of deep black that seemed to absorb the sensor light rather than reflect it. Then, at the edge of the image, something that might have been a ship, or might have been the shape a ship leaves behind after it stops being one. The crew gathered in small groups and talked in low voices. Chief Engineer Petra Novik found Voss in the small alcove off the bridge where the captain took her meals alone. Novik was built like someone who had spent 20 years in hard vacuum, which she had short and wide-shouldered, with hands that were always slightly greasy no matter how many times she washed them. She carried a wrench the way other people carry phones, just on her person, all the time, for reasons no one questioned. "They're scared," Novik said. She sat down across from Voss without being invited. That was one of the things that made her useful. The hegemony. You can hear it in the translation pattern, short clauses, repetition of the warning, that's fear syntax. "You speak hegemony now." "I speak machine translation, which is close enough." Novik leaned her elbows on the table. "What I'm saying is, they didn't put that wall up to stop us from getting somewhere dangerous. They put it up because what's back there scares the ever-living life out of them, and they don't want anyone else seeing that it does." Voss said nothing. "Also," Novik continued, "I ran a structural analysis on those barrier buoys. They're not weapons, they're markers, signal emitters. The wall isn't designed to stop anything physically. It's a message. A very big, very expensive message that says, we decided not to go there, that's all." Voss looked at her. "You're telling me the wall doesn't shoot." "I'm telling you the wall is a sign." The captain was quiet for a moment. Then, "What does the crew say?" Novik scratched the back of her neck. "About half of them want to go home. About a quarter of them want to know what's on the other side. The last quarter are pretending they don't have an opinion, but they're watching you like you already know the answer and they're waiting for you to say it out loud." "And you?" Novik picked up her wrench, turned it once in her hand, put it back on her belt. "I didn't come 14 months into the dark to look at a sign and turn around." Voss stood up. She took her coffee cup to the tiny recycler slot, fed it in, listened to the machine process it. "Call a crew meeting," she said. "Full roster, 1 hour." The meeting happened in the cargo bay, the only space on the Relentless big enough to hold everyone at once. 218 crew. They stood in loose clusters among the stacked equipment containers, sitting on the edges of storage racks and equipment pallets, faces lit by the work lights. It smelled like metal and recycled air, and the particular tiredness of people who had been a long way from home for a long time. Voss stood on a cargo container so they could see her. She didn't use a microphone. "You've all seen the transmissions," she said, her voice carried. "The hegemony outer veil, a barrier stretching across our current heading, built by the most powerful collective of intelligent species in the known galaxy. They've told us to turn around 6 times. They've sent images of what's ahead. They've invoked accord law." She let that sit for a moment. "They have not explained what is ahead. They have not told us what they found or when they found it or why they decided that the answer was a wall instead of a warning with actual information in it. They have decided on our behalf that we are not ready, that whatever is out there is not for us, that we should go home." A few people shifted. No one spoke. "I want to be very clear about what I'm going to say next," Voss continued. "I am not ordering anyone to do anything. This crew has the right to object. This crew has the right to a full vote under Mission Protocol Article 12. If a majority of you want to return to Earth, I will set the course myself, and I will file the mission report without a single negative notation for any of you. I mean that." She looked out across the faces. "But I want you to think about one thing first. The hegemony is old. They've been traveling space for longer than humans have had written language. They have seen things we haven't. They have survived things we haven't. They know things we don't. And with all of that, they looked at what's ahead of us and said, we will not go there. We will build a wall. We will tell everyone else not to go there either. We will call it an accord." She paused. The hegemony is not known for being afraid of things. The cargo bay was very quiet. So the question in front of us isn't whether it's dangerous. It probably is. The question is whether the thing that made the most experienced spacefaring civilization in the galaxy stop and build a wall is something that humans can afford not to understand. She stepped down from the container. "HFY, give me the vote count in 20 minutes. She walked out. The vote came back, 161 to 57 in favor of continuing. Voss read the number, nodded once and went back to the bridge. The hegemony sent a seventh transmission when the Relentless began moving again. This one was different. The earlier messages had been formal, bureaucratic, the language of official bodies exercising official authority. This one was short. "You do not understand what you are approaching. We are ASKINGU, species 2 species, to stop." HFY read it 3 times. He found Voss at her command station. "They said asking," he said quietly. "Not ordering, not warning, asking." "I read it." "That's not hegemony diplomatic language, Captain. That's something else. That's," he searched for the word, "that's personal." Voss was watching the barrier on the main screen. The Relentless was close enough now that the individual ships in the wall were visible as distinct shapes. She could see the buoy lights cycling. She could see, in the dark gaps between the vessels, the space beyond, and HFY was right. The stars out there did look wrong. Not in a way she could put in a log. Just wrong the way a face looks wrong in low light. She keyed the comms. "Takiv, reply to the hegemony." "What do I say?" She thought about it, not for long. "Tell them we understand that you are asking. Tell them we appreciate that. Tell them we're still going." Takiv typed it, sent it. Then he looked up from his board with the expression of someone who had just done something that could not be undone. "Message sent, Captain." "Good." She folded her hands on the command table. "Novik, what's our approach speed?" "From the engineering station, 800 meters per second. We'll reach the barrier in about 20 minutes. Slow to 400. I want time to look at those buoys up close." "Aye." The crew settled into their stations. Voices dropped. The usual hum and click of the ship system seemed louder in the quiet. 20 minutes passed. At the barrier line, the buoys pulsed their steady orange light, steady and deliberate, like a heartbeat that had been beating for a very long time. The hegemony ships on either side of the gap the Relentless was moving toward did not fire, did not move, did not make any attempt to physically stop them. They watched. That was all. Every sensor array the Relentless had was picking up being watched. Dozens of alien sensor sweeps, crossing each other, painting the human ship in light that wasn't visible light, in frequencies that felt somehow like attention. Voss stood at the forward window. Ahead of the barrier, the dark was different. She had stood at many windows in many parts of space and looked at dark, and she knew by now that dark had texture. It had depth and movement and the cold shimmer of background radiation. The dark ahead had none of that. It was dark the way a closed door is dark, the way a question is dark before it is answered. Captain Takiv's voice was careful. "We're at the buoy line. Take us through." The Relentless crossed the barrier. No alarm, no weapon fire, no dramatic beam of energy trying to turn them back. The buoy lights went on cycling, orange and steady, behind them now. The hegemony ships receded on the rear sensors, still watching. HFY was at his station, running every passive scan the ship had. He didn't say anything for a long moment. "Then, Captain, the background radiation out here. What about it?" "It's not from this galaxy." He turned in his chair. His face was doing the complicated thing again, the thing it did when he was translating something into words that weren't quite right for it. "The radiation signature is old, older than the Milky Way. It's like..." He stopped. "Like what, HFY?" He looked at the forward screen, at the dark ahead of them. Like we just walked into a room that was here before the house was built, he said. No one on the bridge spoke. The relentless moved deeper. The stars behind them shrank. The stars ahead, the ones that looked wrong, began to look less like stars and more like lights seen through water, still there, just not quite where they should be. On the rear sensor feed, the hegemony outer veil held its position, unchanged, patient, waiting for something, or for the relentless to come back, or for proof that it wouldn't. The first thing that stopped working was the clocks. Not all of them, not in any way that caused immediate danger, just the small, quiet disagreements that Novik noticed when she ran her morning diagnostic. The internal chronometers on Deck 4 were running 4 seconds behind the ones on Deck 7. Not a big gap, but every chronometer on a ship like the Relentless was set from the same master source and synchronized every 6 hours. 4 seconds was not a drift. 4 seconds was a difference in how time was moving through different parts of the ship. She recalibrated them. They drifted again within an hour. She didn't report it to the captain yet. She took it apart first, the way she took everything apart methodically, without drama, looking for the simple answer before she let herself consider the complicated one. The simple answer didn't show up. She noted it in her personal log, put 2 red stars next to it, and moved on to the rest of her board. 40 hours past the barrier, the Relentless was running at reduced speed, all passive sensors extended, and the crew had settled into the uneasy calm that comes when people have committed to a thing and are waiting for the thing to begin. The tension of the vote and the crossing had faded. What replaced it was not relaxed, it was watchful. The difference between a person who is scared and a person who is paying very close attention. The mess hall was half full at most hours. People ate in smaller groups than usual. They talked, but the conversations had gaps in them. Akafar spent most of his time in the science bay, which was a narrow room 2 levels below the bridge fitted with more screens than a person should comfortably have to look at all at once. He had been running the background radiation data through every analytical model the ship carried, and some he was building himself on the fly. The results were consistent and impossible. The radiation in this region was older than most of the matter in the known universe. It was not leftover heat from an ancient explosion. It was structured, patterned, like something had used it. He wrote that sentence in his notes, then stared at it, then did not delete it. The second thing that happened was the dreams. Not everyone, not at the same time, but within 48 hours past the barrier, 11 crew members had independently reported to Dr. Mina Hassan, the ship's physician, that they were having unusually vivid dreams. Not nightmares. Not anxiety dreams, which would have made more sense given the circumstances. Dreams that felt instructive. Dreams full of things that seemed to be trying to show them something rather than scare them. Hassan compiled the reports. She noticed patterns she didn't like. The imagery in the dreams was different for each person, but the structure was the same. In every report, someone was trying to get the dreamer's attention from a very long distance away. In every report, the dreamer had the feeling that whatever was calling them was doing so not because it wanted to be found, but because it was surprised that they were close enough to hear. She took her report to Voss. Voss read it at her command station, which was how she read most things standing, because she claimed sitting made her brain slower. She read it twice. 11, she said. As of this morning, I've had 3 more crew members mention it informally since I filed that report. Are they functional? Yes, alert. Actually, if anything, slightly more alert than baseline. Sleep quality reports are up despite the unusual content. That's strange. Everything about this is strange, Captain. Voss handed the tablet back. Keep monitoring daily reports. Hassan paused at the door. There's one more thing. The dream imagery, the things the crew are being shown differ between individuals, but I ran a cross-analysis, and there's one element that appears in every single account. She looked down at her own tablet. Distance. Every dream has a strong sense of something very, very far away that is, somehow, getting less far. Voss looked at the forward screen. at the dark that wasn't quite dark. That's not reassuring, she said. No, Hassan agreed, it's really not. What they found on day 3, past the barrier, was not what any of them had expected. It was Ensign Kada on the long-range passive scan who caught it first, a density cluster at the edge of sensor range. Not a planet, not a star. The mass reading was large but diffuse, spread over a region of space that should have been empty. She flagged it and let the computers build a picture over the next 4 hours. What came back was a field of objects. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, spread across a volume of space roughly the size of a small solar system's outer belt. Each object was discrete, not connected to the others, not in orbit around anything, not following any pattern that the navigation AI could map as natural. They were just there in the dark, unmoving. Voss brought the Relentless to a slow stop 2,000 kilometers from the nearest cluster. She then moved them into 500. Close enough to see. The objects were the ruins of ships. Not one kind of ship, not one era. They were from different species, different periods, different levels of technology, from simple drives that looked almost primitive to configurations so advanced the Relentless's hull analysis system couldn't categorize their material composition. Some were cracked open. Some were intact but cold, no power signature, no life sign, no movement. Some had been sitting here long enough that micrometeorite impact had given them their own texture, like ancient coral. The crew at the observation windows didn't speak for a while. How old? Voss asked. HFY was running his tablet hard. The oldest ones that cluster to the port side, the 5 large hulls, the material degradation suggests at least 30,000 years. Someone behind Voss exhaled sharply. They tried, Novik said. She was standing to Voss's left, looking at a smooth-hulled vessel that floated at a slight angle, a crack running along its upper third like an old scar. They came out here same as us, different species, different ships. They tried. And they stopped, Takiv said. His voice was careful. But they didn't turn around, they're still here. That was the thing that kept the bridge quiet for the next several minutes. The ships hadn't turned around. They weren't fleeing back toward the barrier. They were pointed forward. Every single vessel in that field in the scan data, every single one was aimed deeper into the zone. Whatever had happened to them had happened while they were still going in. Voss took the Relentless through the field slowly, running every scan the ship had. The long-range team logged each wreck species, rough age estimate, technology level. HFY moved between his own station and the science bay and back, talking too fast, which was how she knew he was genuinely shaken. Usually he was the slowest speaker on the ship. Some of these species don't appear in any hegemony records I have access to, he told her. Not as current members, not as extinct, not as anything, which means either they predate hegemony record-keeping or they never made it back to be recorded, Voss said. Yes. She let the ship drift through the field for 3 hours. She wanted the crew to see it. Not because she wanted to frighten them, she didn't think it would, not the ones who had voted to come this far, but because she believed in letting people look at the actual shape of what they were walking into. Honest information made for better decisions. Fear born from uncertainty was the kind that made people stupid. Fear born from facts was the kind that made people careful. After 3 hours, she took the ship out of the field and continued forward. The hegemony contacted them again that night. The transmission was different from the previous ones in a way Takiv flagged immediately. The encryption protocol was not the standard hegemony broadcast format. It was a directed tight beam transmission. Someone had tracked the Relentless through the barrier, through the drift, through the wreck field, and sent this specifically to them. The message wasn't informal hegemony syntax. It was translated directly into English, not the committee language of diplomatic transmissions, but something that felt like it had been written by an individual, quickly, with care. We know what you found, the field of dead ships. We know what you will think when you see it. You will think these species lack something we have. You will think humans are different. You will push on. We understand this. We were once the same. We found the field too. We went past it. What is ahead of you did not destroy us. That is what you will tell yourselves, but we came back. We built the wall. We built it not because we were cowards. We built it because we understood when we came back that what is ahead is not something that can be survived by trying. There is no version of going forward that ends the way you want it to. Please, go home. Okafor read it aloud to the senior staff in the briefing room off the bridge. When he finished, the room was quiet. Commander Shen Wei, the ship's tactical officer, a quiet man who had said very little since the crossing, spoke first. They're still warning us, but the tone is different. The tone is different every time, Novik said. First it was orders, then it was a formal request, then it was species to species asking. Now it's, she gestured at the tablet. Now it's almost like talking to someone who tried the same thing and doesn't want to watch you make the same mistake. That's exactly what it reads like, Okafor said. Voss was at the small window at the end of the room. The dark outside was doing the thing it had been doing since they entered the zone, looking like it had a texture that was just too far away to make out. What strikes me, she said without turning around, is what they don't say. The room waited. They say going forward doesn't end the way we want it to. They say it can't be survived by trying. They don't say we'll die. They don't say we'll lose our minds. They don't say what happens. They describe a result without describing the thing itself. She turned around. That means they know what we'll find. They've seen it. They came back from it. And whatever it is, they've decided not to tell us because, I think, they've decided that knowing in advance would change the result in a way they don't want to be responsible for. Shen Wei looked at her. What kind of result would that be? I don't know, but they're still in contact with us. They tracked us through the barrier and sent us a personal message. The hegemony doesn't do personal. They're not trying to stop us anymore. She looked at the tablet with the message on it. They're trying to prepare us for something, in their way, without telling us what it is. The room digested this. That's either very considerate, Novik said, or very frightening. Probably both, Voss said. She replied to the hegemony that night. She wrote the message herself, without asking Takiv or Okafor to draft it, because she wanted it to be in her words. We read your message. We saw the field. You're right that we thought about those crews. You're wrong about what we concluded. We did not think they lacked something we have. We thought they were brave. And we thought, if they came this far and didn't turn back, they must have had a reason worth honoring. We're going on, not because we are reckless, because we believe that something which has been calling to 14 species across 30,000 years deserves an answer from someone. We don't know if that someone is us. But we're the ones who are here. She sent it, lay in her bunk, did not sleep for a long time. The dreams, when they finally came, were quiet. She was standing in a very large room. Not a room, a space that had the feeling of a room without the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Just that sense of being somewhere defined, somewhere that had been prepared. And from very far away, something was looking at her. Not looking, noticing. The difference in the dream felt important. The difference between a predator clocking prey and something ancient realizing, with something that wasn't quite surprise, that someone new had finally come to the edge of a place it had been for longer than it had words to say. She woke up to her alarm, checked her bunk clock, then checked it against the wall chronometer. 6-second difference. She got dressed and went to the bridge. Ahead of them, the not quite dark had changed overnight. The distorted stars had brightened. Not because they were closer, because something in the distance ahead had noticed the relentless approaching and turned, in some wordless way, toward the light. Novik, Voss said, settling into her station. Captain, how are the clocks? A pause. Getting worse, Novik said, but in a consistent direction. Time on the forward decks is running slightly faster than time on the aft decks. Voss looked at the bright and dark ahead. Time runs faster closer to something with mass, she said. Yes, Novik agreed. Something big is up there. Something very big, Novik said, and it's not a star. The relentless moved on. Behind it, impossibly far away and impossibly watching, the hegemony outer veil held its line. No new transmissions came. Either the hegemony had nothing left to say, or they had decided that what was about to happen didn't need their words. Both possibilities felt like the same thing. They felt like the silence before an answer. On the fifth day past the barrier, physics started being polite about things it shouldn't have needed to be polite about. It was Novak who first found the word for it. She was running engine diagnostics when the power readings on the drive cores gave her a number that was technically correct but shouldn't have been achievable with the current fuel load. The drive was getting more output than it was putting in. Not a lot more. Not enough to matter in practical terms. But energy conservation is not a suggestion. It is a rule. It is the oldest rule in the universe, and it does not take days off. She rechecked everything. The numbers held. "It's like the ship is being helped," she said to HFY, who had come down to the engine room because she had stopped answering his calls, and he had correctly concluded that meant something interesting was happening. HFY looked at her boards. "Helped how?" "I don't know, like the space between here and there is slightly less resistant than it should be. Like," she stopped, turned the wrench in her hand. "Like being on a moving walkway. You put in walking energy, you get moving walkway speed." HFY thought about that. Something is reducing the friction. Something is making it easier to come toward it. She set the wrench on the console and looked at him, which is either completely fine or the most terrifying thing I have ever said out loud. HFY went back to the science bay. He pulled up every piece of theory about gravity-adjacent forces he could access in the ship's database. He read for 5 hours. He came out with a single conclusion that he wrote down twice to make sure he believed it. Whatever is ahead of us wants to be reached. Not wants in the way living things want. Not desire, not need. Want in the way a drain wants water. A structural inclination. An arrangement of forces that made approaching it easier than not approaching it. He took this to Voss at the command table. She looked at the sentence. "Does it know we're coming?" she asked. "I don't think know is the right word for what it does, but," he sat down across from her. "Captain, the radiation pattern I've been tracking, it's been restructuring, slowly over the last 40 hours. When I plot its current arrangement against the position and heading of this ship, it looks like..." He turned his tablet to face her. The screen showed a rendered image of the radiation field ahead of them, a vast, tangled structure of ancient energy, like a weather system the size of a galaxy arm. At its center, rendered in orange by the analysis software, a shape that the computer had defaulted to labeling unknown configuration. The shape was not a circle, not a spiral, not any natural formation HFY had in his references. It was an opening. Like a hand had reached in from the outside of a thing and pulled a gap in it. And the gap was aimed at the relentless. "It made room for us," Voss said. "The radiation field restructured around our approach vector." "Yes." HFY pulled the tablet back. "I want to be very precise. This could be natural. There is no definitive proof of intent here, but the mathematical probability of this being coincidental." "How low?" He said a number. It had many zeros. Voss stared at the screen for a moment. "You should sleep," she said. "You've been up a long time." "I can't sleep," HFY said. "I keep dreaming." "What do you dream?" He looked at the forward screen, at the opening in the radiation field rendered in orange waiting for them. "I dream about a library," he said, "except I'm not allowed in yet because I haven't said the right word, but whatever is at the door is very patient. It has been waiting a long time for someone to figure out the word." He paused. "In the dream, I get the feeling it's been waiting for someone who's capable of figuring out the word. Not just anyone, a specific kind of mind." "What kind?" "I don't know. I never make it past the door." He went to his bunk. He did not sleep. On the 6th day, they saw it. The word "it" was insufficient, but the ship's entire vocabulary, gathered from every language human civilization had ever produced, was also insufficient, so it would have to do for the moment. What the forward sensors showed, when the Relentless cleared the last of the radiation field and came into the zone that the opening had created, was a structure. The word structure was also insufficient but was at least structurally accurate in a way that pure description would not be. It had been built. Not grown, not formed, not collapsed into. Built. By something or somethings that had been operating at a scale of intention so large that the building had taken on properties of natural phenomena. The way a very large city from high enough above looks like a geological feature. It was dark, not the absence of light dark of space. Dark in the way that very old things are dark, the way a stone wall at the bottom of a sea is dark. It absorbed sensor sweeps the way sand absorbs water, pulling them in and returning nothing useful. Its edges, where they met the background of space, shimmered slightly in a frequency that Dr. Hassan's team identified as being close to the low end of human visible light. It was very slightly, barely, just enough to be real, glowing. It had no obvious front, no obvious size. The sensors gave different readings depending on the angle, and the engineering team spent an hour running calibration checks before Novik told them to stop, because the calibrations were fine, and the problem was the object. It doesn't want to be measured, Takiv said, which was not a scientific statement but was the most accurate one on the bridge. It doesn't know how to be measured, Akafar corrected. I don't think it conceptualizes itself in terms of size. It may not have edges the way we think of edges. So what is it? Shen Wei asked. Old, Akafar said. Everyone waited. That's all I have right now, he said. It's very, very old. Voss put the Relentless at station keeping 400 kilometers out and held it there. For 6 hours, nothing happened. On the 7th hour, the structure's glow changed color. Not dramatically, not into some blazing signal fire. It shifted from its pale, near-visible frequency to something slightly warmer, still at the edge of human perception, but definitively warmer. Like a house with no lights in it, at night, through a window, where a single candle has just been lit somewhere inside. Hassan's medical board lit up simultaneously. She was on the bridge in under a minute. Every crew member who has been having the dreams, she said, slightly out of breath from the ladder. Their neural readings just changed. Same moment. All of them. They're not asleep, they're fully awake, but the pattern is the same as the dream state. Voss looked at her board. All of them. All of them, and Hassan stopped. Doctor. The crew members who were not having the dreams are now reporting them for the first time. Hassan looked at her tablet, then at the structure on the screen. All of them, Captain. It's talking to all of us. Akafar was already at his station, pulling everything he had. His voice, when he spoke, was very controlled, the control of a man keeping something large and fast very deliberately inside a box. The radiation field is changing again. The pattern, he stopped typing. Akafar. It's addressing us. The radiation restructuring. I've seen this pattern in signal analysis, in linguistic theory. The restructuring has the basic shape of a communication attempt. It's not using radio frequency or light. It's using the fabric of the space around it to say something. Can you read it? No, not yet, but he looked up. The dreams are the same thing. It's been using the same method the whole time. We didn't recognize it as communication because we were looking for radio waves and laser pulses. It's been talking to us since before we crossed the barrier. The bridge was very still. It talked to the other species too, Shen Wei said. The ones in the wreck field. Yes, Akafar said. And they stopped. Yes. Shen Wei looked at the structure on the forward screen. Why are we still moving? Akafar opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his data, looked at the screen. I don't know, he said honestly. The communication is the same, the method is the same, but something about how we're receiving it is different. He didn't have a theory yet. He was building one from the ground up in real time, with data that kept changing the shape of the building while he was trying to put up walls. But there was one thing, one small data point that kept presenting itself as important, and he kept setting it aside, because it seemed too simple to be the answer to a question this big. The other species in the rec field had been old. All of them the hegemony, the species whose names didn't appear in any record, the ones who had been coming here for 30,000 years, were old civilizations. Millions of years of history. Stable biology, stable psychology, stable cultural structures so refined that change itself was, at some level, a managed process. Humans had been in space for less than 200 years. Humans had been writing things down for 6,000. Humans, when they looked at a door with an unknown thing behind it, historically did one of two things: kicked it down or went around the side to find a window. No other species on the Rec Manifest had that particular record. He wrote the idea down, put 3 question marks next to it, left it there. The structure's glow continued its slow, warm shift. The dreams continued. A crew member in hydroponics reported that during her waking dream she had felt something like curiosity aimed at her, not her in a general sense, but her specifically, the particular texture of her mind. A tech on Deck 3 said the thing in his dream had seemed, when it found him, the way a person seems when they have been calling a number for a very long time and someone finally picks up. An engineer's apprentice, 19 years old from a small city in Manitoba, said it felt like being found. Voss sat at her command station and read all of the reports. Then she read the hegemony's last message again. There is no version of going forward that ends the way you want it to. She thought about that sentence. She had been thinking about it since she first read it. It was precise in its imprecision. It didn't say going forward ended badly. It said it didn't end the way they wanted. She wondered what the hegemony had wanted when they came here. She thought about what humans had come here wanting, which was to know, to see, to answer the question, because the question existed, and unanswered questions for humans had always been an itch that had to be scratched, a door that had to be opened, a voice in the distance that had to be followed until you found the thing making it. Maybe, she thought, the hegemony had come here wanting to control what they found, to assess it, to decide how much of it to bring back and how much to leave here, to manage the encounter the way ancient civilizations manage everything, through the lens of a species that had survived so long specifically because they were very, very good at not being surprised. The thing in the dark ahead had surprised them anyway, and they had not known what to do with a surprise that big, so they had labeled it dangerous and built a wall. Humans were surprised on a Tuesday, were surprised again on Wednesday, were surprised again on Thursday, and usually it made them angry and then curious, and then they went at it until they understood it or broke it or both. That was not a virtue, necessarily. Voss had no illusions about that. But in front of a thing that communicated through the basic structure of space, that had been trying to make contact for longer than recorded human history, that had watched 30,000 years of other species come to the edge and turn back. Maybe an old, careful, well-managed civilization wasn't what was needed. Maybe what was needed was a species that hadn't learned to be afraid of being surprised. She went to the forward window. The structure's glow was warmer now, almost warm enough to see without the sensor assist. She stood there looking at it until she could make out, with her bare eyes, the soft, impossible light of a thing that had been waiting in the dark for a very long time. Behind her she heard someone at a workstation exhale, a small, stunned sound. Captain Takiv said quietly, "I'm getting a structured signal, radio frequency, clear band." He turned in his chair. "It's in English." The bridge went completely silent. "Read it," Voss said. He looked at his screen. When he read, his voice had the quality of a person reading something that they have not decided yet whether to believe. It says, "We have been trying to understand your language from your broadcasts for 112 of your years. We apologize that it took so long. You are very loud and your media was confusing. We watched many of your films. The ones with the sharks were educational." No one on the bridge said anything. Then, from the back of the room near the engineering station, Novik made a sound. It took a moment to identify. She was laughing. Not nervously, not the short, sharp laugh of someone releasing stress. She was laughing the way you laugh at something that catches you completely off guard and is genuinely, fundamentally, absurdly funny. It spread. It moved across the bridge the way warmth moves through a cold room slowly, then all at once. Voss looked at the structure ahead of them, with its ancient glow and its impossible size, and its 30,000 years of waiting. It had learned English from their television. It had watched their shark movies. She shook her head, slowly. The corner of her mouth moved. "Takiv," she said. "Captain." "Reply, tell them," she stopped, started again. "Tell them we're glad they reached out. Tell them the shark films are a poor representation of actual sharks, but we understand the confusion. And tell them," she looked at the screen, at the glow, at the vast dark thing in the vast dark, patiently waiting, ancient beyond reckoning, having spent a century learning their language from their noise, "tell them we'd like to talk." The entity, they came to call it the architect, because it needed a name, and Akafar said that was the least presumptuous one available, communicated slowly at first. Not because it was forming its words carefully, because it was forming its words at all. The concept of using a linear string of discrete sounds to convey information was, it explained in its third message, very strange and somewhat inefficient compared to the method it used to talk to itself, which involved restructuring local spacetime in ways that contained entire concepts as shapes. It compared trying to talk to humans via radio to a person trying to explain a painting by humming the colors. It seemed charmed by the challenge. The architect's messages came through the standard comms board, received on radio frequencies, in clean grammatical English that had the occasional structural oddness of a language learned from context rather than instruction. It had pulled its vocabulary from 80 years of human radio and television broadcasts. It knew the words for things humans talked about on television, which meant it had excellent vocabulary for interpersonal drama, competitive cooking, and geopolitical crisis, and somewhat less robust vocabulary for pure mathematics, which it noted it found amusing given that mathematics was the language it used for everything important. Akafar sat at the primary comm station for most of the first 72 hours of contact, sleeping in 2-hour blocks on a cot Novik had dragged up from stores and wedged between 2 console racks. He ate at his station. He talked, and he listened, and he took notes with a speed that turned his handwriting into something approaching the visual record of an earthquake. Voss read everything as it came in. She asked questions. She made Akafar slow down and ask follow-up questions when the answers were unclear, and she made him write the answers out twice in different words to make sure the meaning held under translation pressure. What came out of those 72 hours was this. The architect was not alone. It was one of a small number of entities. The number appeared to be between 9 and 12, though the architect explained that counting itself and its kind in the way humans counted objects was not quite accurate. The way counting the leaves of a tree doesn't quite capture the tree. They were very old. They had been in this region of space since before the current arrangement of galaxies existed. They had been here, as best Akafar could understand it, watching things form. The stars, the systems, the slow chemistry that turned dead rock into cells and cells into creatures and creatures into beings that looked up and asked questions. They had been watching that last part with particular interest for a very long time. You watch civilizations develop, Akafar said, in a quiet moment when Voss had stepped off the bridge to eat something. We watch the ones that develop curiosity, the architect replied. Many develop intelligence, fewer develop curiosity. The difference is this: intelligence is a tool for surviving what exists. Curiosity is a tool for reaching what does not yet exist. Intelligence without curiosity makes very long-lived civilizations. Curiosity without sufficient intelligence destroys things quickly. The combination is rare. When we find it, we pay attention. Akafar looked at his screen. You've been paying attention to us. For several thousand of your years. Your curiosity was apparent long before your space travel. You told stories about things that did not exist as if they did. You built religions about things you could not prove. You sailed to edges of your world's maps with no knowledge of what was beyond them. A pause. There was always a slight pause when the architect was constructing a sentence in English, a hesitation that read to Akafar like consideration. You named the unknown territories on those maps with the words, "Here be dragons." Then you sailed into them. "We found no dragons," Akafar said. "No, but you looked, that is the thing." The other species who had come here over the 30,000 years of the wreck field, the architect told them about those too. Not every crew, not every vessel, but the broad history of it. The old civilizations, most of them now hegemony members or predecessors to current hegemony species, that had picked up the architect's signals in their deep space exploration and followed them in. Some had come once. Some had come multiple times before finally turning back. One species had come 17 times over the course of 6,000 years, each expedition more equipped, more theoretically prepared, more certain they had finally solved for whatever was causing their previous failures. Each time the same result. The crew became unable to function, not through physical harm. Through cognitive overload, the architect's communication method, when experienced directly and without preparation, essentially put the receiving mind into a state of sustained revelation that the mind could not come back from. Too much context all at once. The architectural understanding of deep time, of the structure of the universe as the architect experienced it, of the answers to questions the incoming species had not yet thought to ask. It arrived all together, at full scale, like trying to drink from a waterfall with a cup. The species in the wreck field had not died from violence. They had died from knowing too much too fast. The architect had been trying to solve this problem for 30,000 years. It had been experimenting with incremental transmission, with gentler frequencies, with dream state approaches that let the information arrive in pieces rather than all at once. None of it had worked. The minds of the species who came here were too organized, too ordered. Their civilizations had spent millions of years developing cognitive structures that were very efficient and very stable, which meant they were also very brittle when faced with information that did not fit into existing frameworks. The frameworks shattered. The minds went with them. Akafar wrote this down, read it back, wrote it again. "What's different about us?" he asked. "Why are we still functional?" The architect was quiet for longer than usual before answering. "You are not organized in the same way," it said finally. "Your civilization is very young. Your individual minds are very young. The cognitive structures you build to understand the world are not yet stable enough to be brittle. When information arrives that does not fit your frameworks, you do not suffer a catastrophic failure of the framework. You modify the framework. You argue about modifying the framework. Sometimes you throw the framework out entirely and build a new one in an afternoon." Akafar looked at his notes. "You're saying we're flexible because we haven't been around long enough to be rigid." "I am saying that the quality that makes a civilization durable over millions of years, the quality of having a settled, organized, stable understanding of the universe, is precisely the quality that makes direct contact with something like us impossible." Another pause. "You are not settled. You are not organized. You are not stable." "No," Akafar agreed, "we're really not." "We have been waiting," the architect said, "for a civilization young enough to still be changing shape." He sat with that for a while. Then he went to find Voss. She was in the small alcove off the bridge, eating something that used to be a rice-based meal before the ship's processors had been at it for 14 months and had done their best. She looked up when he came in. "You look like someone just told you the answer to everything," she said. "Not everything," he said, "but a lot of it." He sat across from her and told her what the architect had said. All of it. The other species, the cognitive overload, the brittleness of old organized minds, the long search for something young enough and chaotic enough to receive what it was trying to send. Voss listened without interrupting. This was one of the things that made her worth working for. When he finished, she put down her fork. The hegemony said going forward wouldn't end the way we wanted, she said. Yes. They didn't mean it as a threat. They meant it as a description of what happened to them. She looked at her hands. They went home because what they found broke their people. Not violently, just, she didn't finish the sentence. Broke them, HFY said. They built the wall to stop anyone else from going through the same thing. Which is genuinely kind, he said, in a way. Genuinely kind and completely wrong, she agreed. Because the thing they experienced as catastrophic, the thing that shattered their frameworks and sent them home, is the thing that humans do on a slow Tuesday. She picked up her fork again. Change our frameworks, she said. Change our frameworks, he agreed. The next 72 hours were the most remarkable period in human history, which was notable because the most remarkable period in human history had previously been a week when 3 separate things tied for the title and historians had needed to have a long meeting about it. The architect, now that the initial explanation of the situation was complete, began doing what it had been waiting 30,000 years to do. It began transmitting context. Not all at once, not in the waterfall with a cup way that had broken the other species. It went slowly, at human pace, which was, apparently, faster than it had expected. The crew of the Relentless, despite their individual differences, turned out to share one essential quality. When given new and extraordinary information, they adjusted. They had arguments about it. They had emotional responses to it. They built it into their existing understanding, or they rebuilt their existing understanding around it, or both, and then they came back with more questions. This last part, the architect noted, was unprecedented. In all 30,000 years of trying, no previous crew had immediately, upon receiving an answer, produced a dozen new questions as a direct response to it. It described this as delightful. In English, with a word it had clearly gotten from human television, because it used it with the enthusiasm of a being that had recently discovered the concept. What the architect transmitted in those 72 hours. The universe was older than the models suggested, but not by a number, by a kind. There had been something before the current arrangement of matter and energy, not a previous universe in the way the cycle models described, but a state of existence so different from the current one that the word universe did not quite apply. The architect and its kind were remnants of that previous state. Not survivors, there was no disaster, no end to what came before. It had simply become this. Transformed. The architects had persisted through the transformation the way some deep-sea organisms persist when the ocean's chemistry shifts, by being, fundamentally, outside the thing that changed. They had watched the current universe form. They had watched it develop complexity, life, mind. They had found, across billions of years, that mind was the most interesting thing the universe produced, more interesting than stars, more interesting than the grand structures of galactic filaments, because mind was the only thing the universe had yet produced that looked back at itself and asked why. They had been looking for a mind young enough to look back without breaking. They had been looking for a long time. Commander Shen Wei received a personal transmission. It arrived during his watch, addressed directly to him by name. The architect, apparently, had individuated the crew's dream signatures and learned to distinguish them. The message was brief. You are the one who asked why your species was still moving when the others stopped. The answer is this. The others came here understanding the universe was very large and very old. You came here knowing that the universe was very large and very old, but not quite believing it yet. The difference is that the ones who believed it in full were finished being surprised by it. You are not finished. You are, in fact, barely started. Shen Wei read it twice, then once more. Then he filed it in the ship's log because he had decided that everything that happened in this zone needed to go in the ship's log, because when they got home, someone was going to have to explain all of this, and the log would be the only thing that made it real enough to explain. He noted the time. Then he checked the clock against the wall chronometer out of habit. They were synchronized, perfectly, down to the millisecond. He called down to engineering. Novik, the clock discrepancy. I know, she said. It fixed itself 4 hours ago, all decks synchronized, and the energy anomaly in the drive core corrected at the same time. She paused. Captain thinks it's because we've stopped moving further in. We're holding position. The effect was related to our approach vector. He thought about that, or, he said. Or, Novik agreed. Whatever is out there isn't doing the helpful thing anymore because we're already here. He looked at the forward screen. At the structure, vast and dark and glowing with its almost visible light, close enough now that the sensors could catch the edges of actual detail. Shapes within shapes, scale within scale, the architecture of a thing built at a size and with a purpose that exceeded the vocabulary for it. It helped us get here, he said. Gently, Novik said. From the beginning, small pushes. He thought about the dreams, the radiation field that had opened ahead of them like a prepared path, the clocks running forward on the decks closest to it. It wanted us here, he said. It's been waiting a very long time, Novik said. Can't blame it for being a little eager. The 70-second hour of contact ended with a message that HFY read aloud to the assembled senior staff on the bridge. His voice careful and steady in the way of a person who has decided that the only reasonable response to something extraordinary is to treat it with the same focus you would give something ordinary. The architect says it has one more thing to transmit. It says it has been preparing it since before human space travel began. It says, this is not information. It is not knowledge. It is not a gift in the way your species understands gifts. It is a key. You will know what to do with it when you have it. All the minds that came before you, they could not carry it because they did not have enough room in their understanding for something that required them to also not understand it. You are, we believe, the first species we have encountered that can hold a certainty and a mystery in the same hand at the same time. He lowered his tablet. It asks if we're ready. The bridge was quiet. Voss looked around the room, at HFY with his sleepless eyes and his overfilled notebooks, at Novik standing with her arms crossed and her wrench on her belt like a talisman, at Shen Wei with his careful, soldier's stillness, at Takiv, who was 26 years old and had been in deep space for 14 months and was looking at the forward screen with an expression that belonged on the face of someone who had been told, for the first time, that the world was bigger than they had believed. She looked at all of them. Tell it yes, she said. Takiv sent the message. The structure's glow shifted one final time, not warmer, not brighter, but different in a way that was not a physical property. Different in the way a room is different when someone in it, after a very long wait, finally takes a breath. And then it began. There was no sound. That was the first thing Voss noticed. Not because she was expecting one, she wasn't, but because in the absence of sound there was something else, something that occupied the space where sound would have been, and it was not silence. Silence is the absence of input. This was the presence of something that did not require ears to receive. It arrived in the body first. Not pain, not pleasure. Something that had the texture of a long-held breath finally released. A settling, like every cell in every person on the Relentless had been slightly tense for their entire lives in a way they had not known about until the tension was gone, and the release made them aware of the tension all at once, retroactively, which was one of the stranger things to experience in a working lifetime. Then the understanding came. It came slowly, in pieces, the way dawn comes, not sudden, not announced, but incremental, one small brightening at a time until you look up and realize it has become fully light without the moment you could point to and say, there, that is when it happened. What the architect gave them was not a list of facts, it was a frame. A way of looking at the universe that placed everything, every piece of science, every historical event, every question humans had ever asked in the dark, into a structure that made the relationships between things visible, not the things themselves. The relationships. The way light through a window does not show you the window, it shows you the room. HFY afterward spent many hours trying to write down what he had understood in the moment of transmission. He could not. Not because he had forgotten it, he hadn't, not a single piece of it, but because the understanding was spatial and writing was linear, and he was trying to describe a building by writing its address. He could convey facts that had arrived with the understanding. He could note the answers to questions. But the frame itself, the way the architect had structured the meaning, that could not be carried in language. It had to be experienced. He wrote this down. He put a single star next to it. He thought it was probably the most important thing in his notes. What he could write down was this: the universe was not random, not in the religious sense, not in the sense of a plan or a maker, in the sense of a pattern. The deep structure of the universe, the one the architect and its kind had watched emerge and develop and complexify over billions of years, had a direction to it. Not a destination, a direction. The way a river has a direction, not because someone planned where it would go, but because the shape of the land makes one path easier than others. The direction was toward complexity, toward mind, toward the capacity for self-awareness. The universe was, in the most literal and non-mystical sense available, in the process of waking up. The architects were early moments of waking, ancient mind, present before the current universe had finished forming, carrying the memory of a previous state of existence into the current one. But they were singular, old, stable, vast, and fundamentally alone. They could not replicate what they were. They could only watch and communicate and hope that what was coming, the new minds, the young species, the ones still in the early stages of becoming complex, would, eventually, produce something that could carry the next stage. A key, the architect had called it. The key was not a piece of technology. It was not a coordinate or a weapon or a formula. It was an understanding of what the universe was for, in the most complete and unsentimental sense of the word for. Not purpose handed down from outside. Purpose that emerged from inside, from the structure itself, from the direction, from the river's own nature. HFY wrote the sentence that had arrived in his mind fully formed during the transmission, in a voice that was not the architect's English but was also not quite his own, the voice of a concept finding the nearest available words. You are not in the universe. You are the universe becoming aware of itself. The awareness is not separate from the thing. You are the thing, looking. He stared at that sentence for a long time. Then Dr. Hassan brought him food because he had not eaten in a long time, and he ate it in his chair, still staring. And after a while he fell asleep at his station with his head on his folded arms, and he slept without dreaming for the first time in 6 days. The crew of the Relentless spent 8 hours in a state that Dr. Hassan, in her medical log, struggled to name. They were functional, completely and normally functional in all physical metrics, heart rate, blood pressure, neural activity. But they were also very quiet. They moved through the ship doing their jobs with the focused calm of people who have received a piece of news that has changed the proportions of their world and are adjusting, carefully, to the new size. No one broke. No framework shattered. There were tears, a few, in private corners of the ship, of the kind that come not from grief but from something too large to hold quietly. There was the occasional laugh, also of that kind. There was a lot of looking out windows at the structure and the old dark and the distant stars. There was, somewhere on deck 3, the sound of someone playing guitar softly, badly, for about an hour. Voss moved through the ship. She didn't call meetings or issue instructions. She walked through and looked, and occasionally stopped to stand near someone who was sitting alone, without saying anything, which was sometimes the right thing to offer. She was in the observation bay on deck 2, a small room with a wide curved window, designed for exactly what the name suggested, when the next message from the architect came through on the ship-wide system. It was brief. You carry it well, better than we hoped. We want to say something that does not translate easily into your language, but we will try. We are glad. We have waited a very long time to be glad. Voss looked at the structure through the observation window, at its glow, which had not diminished or changed since the transmission. If anything, it seemed more steady, settled, in the same way the crew had settled. She pressed the ship-wide comm button on the panel by the door. This is the captain. Her voice went to every speaker on the Relentless. "We are going to hold position for 24 hours, then begin the return to Earth. During that time, all non-essential duty hours are yours. Talk to each other. Write things down. Think. If you need Hassan, she's available. If you need someone to talk to who isn't Hassan, find a crewmate." She paused. "You all did something today that 30,000 years of other species couldn't do. I want you to understand that. You didn't do it because you were braver than them or smarter than them. You did it because you were still young enough to bend instead of break." She released the button. From down the corridor through the thin walls of the ship, she heard someone start clapping, then someone else, then more. It spread in the way warmth spreads slowly, then all at once. She went back to the observation bay and watched the architect's structure until the clapping stopped. What happened next happened in the hours before departure, and it was arguably the most important thing of all. But it happened quietly, in a short exchange between Akafar and the architect, which Akafar later included in the full mission log with a note that it should be read last. Akafar had gone back to the comm station after sleeping. He had written up what he could of the transmission, the facts, the frame, the river's direction. He had organized it as well as it could be organized and acknowledged the limits of what language could carry. Then he had asked the architect one more question. "The hegemony," he said. "They came here. They went home. They built the wall. They spent 30,000 years making sure no one else got hurt the way their people got hurt. And they were right too. They were trying to protect species from something that had broken their own explorers." He looked at his screen. "But they were also blocking something that was trying to reach out, trying to find exactly the kind of mind that could handle it. And every time they turned a ship away, they may have been turning away the species that could have." "Yes," the architect said. Akefir was quiet. "They did not know," the architect said. "They could not have known. The harm was real. The loss was real. What they did was the correct response to the information they had. They protected their kind. They were good stewards of what they knew." A pause. "They were not wrong. They were early. And us. You are also early. The key you carry does not open everything. It opens the next door. The one after that will require something you cannot yet imagine, which means the species that opens it has not yet developed, which means there is still a great deal of the universe left to watch." Akafir looked at his notes, at the room full of things he had written in the last week, the handwriting getting stranger and smaller as the days went on, and the things he was trying to record got bigger. "Are you lonely?" he asked. The pause before the answer was the longest one the architect had ever taken. "We were," it said. "For a very long time, in the only sense that applies to beings like us, we were. The universe was very large and very full of things and very empty of minds that could," another pause, "hold certainty and mystery in the same hand. And now you are here." The Relentless departed 22 hours later. The structure's glow did not fade as they moved away. It remained constant, visible on the forward cameras, even at 100,000 kilometers, even at 1,000,000. It was still a pinpoint of almost visible light on the long-range sensors when they crossed back through the hegemony barrier. The barrier was still there. The hegemony ships were still there. And they were still watching. When the Relentless crossed back through the buoy line, Takiv received a transmission immediately. It was in English. The hegemony had apparently added that capability to their systems at some point over the last several weeks. It was from a single source, one vessel, one individual, addressing them directly. "You came back." There was something in those 3 words that Akafir read 6 times. Not surprise exactly. Something more like, the thing you expected might not happen, which you had prepared yourself for, which had not happened, and which you needed a moment to process. Voss took the comms herself. "We came back," she confirmed. A long pause, then. "The others, the ones from the wreck field, they did not." "No. You are intact. We are intact." Another pause, longer. "What did you find?" Voss looked at Akafir. He looked back at her. The question was enormous and the answer was everything, and the hegemony had been asking it, in one form or another, for 30,000 years. They had built a wall to stop anyone from having to go back to the place the question lived. They had done it out of grief and out of care, and out of the old civilization instinct to manage what could not be managed and contain what could not be contained. They had done it, as the architect said, because they were good stewards of what they knew. She took a breath. Something that has been trying to make contact for longer than your records go back, she said. Something ancient and patient and, as far as we can tell, fundamentally kind. She looked at the forward screen, at the barrier ships, at the vast clean dark of normal space ahead, at the distant galaxy waiting past them with its billions of ordinary stars. It talked to us. We talked back. It gave us something to carry home. The hegemony transmission was silent for so long that Takiv checked to see if the channel was still open. It was. When the response came, it was short. We have been afraid of that place for longer than your species has had language. We built the wall because we could not go back and we could not bear for others to be broken by it as our people were broken. A pause. We want to understand what you found. We want to know how you came back whole. We want to another pause longer. We are not accustomed to asking this. We are asking. Voss let her hand rest on the edge of the command table. The hegemony was old and cautious and vast, and they had spent 30,000 years protecting the universe from a door they were afraid of. They had been wrong and they had been right, and they had been kind in the shape of fear, which was perhaps the most human thing any alien had ever done in her experience. Come find us when we're home, she said. Bring people who ask good questions, we'll talk. The hegemony transmission closed. Takiv set the course. The Relentless turned its nose toward home, toward the long dark of normal space, toward Earth and its 7 billion people, who were going to need to hear something very large explained in terms they had not yet developed. Akafar at his station opened a new document. He stared at the blank page for a moment. He had filled more notebooks in the last 2 weeks than in his previous decade of work, and he still felt like he hadn't found the words for the most important things. Maybe the words didn't exist yet. Maybe that was the point, that humans would have to build them. New language for new size. New frameworks for new room. He started typing. He wrote, "We went past the wall." He stopped, looked at the screen, looked at the dark outside the window, which was normal dark again, deep, complex, full of stars sitting exactly where they should be. He wrote, "They told us to stop." We kept going. The thing at the end was not a monster and not a god and not a danger, except in the way that all true things are dangerous, in the way that knowing changes what you are. He stopped again. He thought about the architect, about 30,000 years of patience, about the wreck field and its brave dead pointing forward, about the hegemony with their wall built from grief, about the crew of this ship, 218 people from a species that had been in space for less than 200 years, who had come to the oldest thing in the universe and instead of breaking, had made conversation. He wrote, "We are very young. We are apparently exactly young enough. The universe is very old and it has been waiting for someone young enough to hear it. We heard it. We will take what we learned home, and then I expect we will come back." He saved the document. Outside the observation window, the stars were where they should be, solid, fixed, ancient lights that had been burning since before the first human eye opened to see them. He thought, we are the universe looking at itself. He thought, it is a very good thing to be looked at after a very long time alone. He closed the document, got up, went to find something to eat and someone to sit with, which was, in the end, the most human thing available to him, and therefore the most correct thing to do. The Relentless moved toward home. Behind it, at the edge of everything that was known and mapped and safe, a light that should not have been visible at this distance was still, improbably, faintly, persistently visible on the aft cameras, warm and steady and patient, the way a porch light is left on for someone expected to return. It stayed lit until the ship was too far to see it. And then, because it had waited 30,000 years once and knew how waiting was done, It kept burning anyway.